I remember that morning as if it were yesterday. It seemed ordinary, but it changed my life and my granddaughter's life forever. The sun had just climbed over the old rooftops of our suburban Atlanta neighborhood. Pale yellow light filtered through the kitchen window and spread across the wooden table that had seen so many years of family meals. I stood at the stove, my cast iron skillet hissing as the eggs began to turn golden. The smell of toast and hot cocoa filled the air, the same breakfast I used to make for my son Michael when he was a boy. I wanted to give Emily, my 5-year-old granddaughter, a sense of warmth and safety. Emily walked out of the small bedroom, holding her worn teddy bear, Barnaby. Her hair was tangled, her little face blotchy, her eyes swollen as if she had cried all night. My heart clenched at the sight. I smiled, softening my voice. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" She did not answer right away. She climbed onto a chair at the table, head down, arms locked tightly around Barnaby. I placed a plate of scrambled eggs and a glass of milk in front of her, hoping the familiar smell would help her feel better. "I made your favorites. Eggs and cocoa. Just a bite." "Okay." Emily gave a faint nod. Lips pressed together. I turned back to the skillet, pretending to be busy so she would not feel pressured. Then her voice slipped into the room, so faint. It was barely more than a breath. "Grandma, Mommy told me I cannot tell you what I saw at home." The spoon slipped from my hand and clattered on the tile floor. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. "Emily, sweetheart, you do not have to be afraid. You can tell me. What did you see?" Her round eyes lifted to mine, shining with tears. She hugged Barnaby tighter, trembling as if she was carrying a secret too heavy for her small shoulders. Finally, her voice cracked and the words came out. "There is a little girl locked in the basement at our house. She cries all the time." She said her hands hurt. I went numb. My ears rang as if a cold wind had rushed through the house. I wanted to believe it was only a child's nightmare, but the terror in Emily's face told me it was not. She broke down, sobbing, and threw herself into my arms. Her tiny body shook like a bird caught in a storm. I held her tight, feeling every ragged breath. "It is okay, baby. Grandma is here. No one will hurt you," I whispered, stroking her tangled hair, trying to calm her and myself. Inside, my mind was racing. Who was that little girl? Why was she in Jessica's basement? And why would Jessica, my daughter-in-law, make her own daughter hide something so terrible? Memories rushed back. I saw Michael alive and strong, tossing Emily in the air and laughing as she giggled. I saw Jessica in those days, smiling, leaning over the counter to ask, "Mom, do you think Michael will like this dish?" She was warm then, full of light. We were a family, not perfect, but happy. Then the accident took Michael away, leaving Jessica hollow and distant. I told myself she just needed time. But as the years passed, she grew colder. Now, after Emily's whisper, I realized something darker was happening. I forced myself to breathe and steady my hands. I could not dismiss this as childish imagination. Somewhere, a child might truly be in danger, and my Emily had carried that fear alone for too long. I pulled back just enough to see her tear-streaked face. "Sweetheart, you were brave to tell me. You did the right thing. I promise you, I will find out the truth. I will protect you, and I will protect that little girl too." Emily nodded slightly but clung to Barnaby as if he was her lifeline. In her eyes I saw fear, but also trust. Trust that her grandmother could fix what was broken. That look became a vow I could not ignore. I was no longer just an old woman rattling around in a lonely house. I was the only one who could carry this secret into the light. That morning, in a kitchen filled with eggs and cocoa, I heard the whisper that shattered my world. In that moment, I knew the road ahead would be hard. But silence was no longer an option. After Emily's whisper that morning, my heart carried a weight I could not put down. While she sat at the table clutching Barnaby, my mind slipped back to the years when this house was filled with warmth. Before grief settled over us, before Michael was taken from me. Michael was the kind of son who could light up a room just by walking in, tall and strong, with an easy smile. He had the kind of presence that made people feel safe. I can still see him stepping through the door after a long day at the construction site, his boots leaving dust on the floor, his laughter echoing down the hallway. He would scoop Emily into his arms and lift her high until her tiny hands reached for the ceiling. Her squeals of joy filled every corner of the house. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, would stand in the kitchen with me, watching them. Back then, she was so different. Her eyes sparkled when she looked at Michael. She would lean toward me and whisper, "Do you think he will like this dish?" "Mom," her smile was bright as the summer sun. We would spend hours cooking together, preparing fried chicken or peach cobbler, talking about recipes and family plans. Those were the golden days when I believed our little family would last forever. But forever is fragile. One rainy night shattered it all. The phone rang after midnight, pulling me out of sleep. I answered, and the trembling voice on the other end delivered the words I never wanted to hear. Michael had been in an accident. His car had skidded off a wet road and gone into a ravine. My knees buckled. My heart screamed, "No, not my boy. Please God, not my boy." But no prayer could undo what had already happened. The funeral was a blur of gray skies and umbrellas. I remember holding Emily, only 2 years old, pressed against my chest. She did not understand what had happened. She asked, "Grandma, where is Daddy?" Her innocent voice cut me deeper than any knife. I whispered, "Daddy is in a faraway place, sweetheart, but he is always watching you." Jessica stood near the casket, her face pale, her eyes empty. She was there, yet already slipping into a world of silence I could not reach. After Michael's death, the house that once rang with laughter became hollow. Jessica changed. Her smile vanished, replaced by a cold stare. She shut herself in her room for hours. Sometimes I heard muffled sobs through the door, but when I knocked, she would only reply, "I am fine. Do not worry." I tried to believe her. I told myself she just needed time, but time did not heal her. It hardened her. Eventually, Jessica announced she was moving to a new apartment across town. She said she needed a fresh start, but I knew she was running away from memories of Michael. Memories lived in every photograph on the wall, every creak of the floorboards, every smell of his favorite meals. She wanted to escape it all. I did not blame her, but my heart broke when she took Emily with her. My granddaughter was the only light I had left, and now I could only see her on weekends. The house grew colder. Nights stretched long and silent. Sometimes I sat in the rocking chair that had once held Michael when he was a baby. I whispered to his picture on the wall, "Son, what should I do? I miss you so much." The only answer was the wind whistling through the cracks of the old porch. When Emily visited, I noticed changes in her. She spoke less, smiled less, and her eyes seemed older than her years. She clung to Barnaby with a grip too tight for a child her age. "I am fine, Grandma," she would always say, but her eyes betrayed her words. They held shadows of fear and sadness I could not ignore. I asked Jessica about it. She brushed me off with empty reassurances. "Mom, do not worry. I take good care of her." But there was no warmth in her voice, only distance. I wanted to believe her, but unease grew inside me like a storm cloud. It was the same unease that returned in full force the morning Emily whispered about the girl in the basement. That whisper was not born out of fantasy. It was the cry of a child who had seen too much. As I held Emily that morning, I realized how far we had fallen from the family we once were. Michael's laughter had once carried us. His love had bound us. Without him, the threads had unraveled, leaving only silence and suspicion. But I also realized something else. I could not bring Michael back. I could not heal Jessica's brokenness. But I could fight for Emily. I could protect her. And maybe, just maybe, I could save the child locked away in that basement too. That thought lit a fire inside me. A fire I had not felt in years. It told me that grief might have stolen my son. But it would not take my granddaughter. It would not take another child either. The past had broken us, but the present demanded action. And I, Maggie Walker, would no longer stand in silence. That night, after Emily's whisper at the breakfast table, I could not rest. The house felt different, as if the walls themselves carried a secret too heavy to contain. I lay awake in my small bedroom, listening to the old clock tick, each second dragging like a stone. Emily slept in the daybed beside me, or at least she tried. I could hear her turning, her little breaths uneven, as though she was fighting off something in her dreams. Barnaby was pressed tight against her chest, his faded button eyes catching the faint glow of the nightlight. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of her whimpering. I sat up, my heart quickening. "Grandma, I'm scared. Don't leave me," she murmured in her sleep. Her tiny fists clenched. I reached for her, brushing the damp hair off her forehead. "I'm here, sweetheart. Grandma is right here." But she did not wake. She stayed caught in her nightmare, her face scrunched in fear. I stroked her hair until her breathing steadied. Yet inside me, worry grew stronger, heavy, like a storm cloud pressing on my chest. In the morning, she looked pale, her eyes red and swollen. I tried to lift her spirits by making pancakes, but she only pushed them around the plate. "Emily, did you have bad dreams?" I asked gently. She shrugged, her voice faint. "It's okay, Grandma. I don't want to talk about it." That silence spoke louder than words. I knew then that something more than dreams haunted her. Later that week, I took her to school. The gravel path crunched under our shoes, and she clung to my hand as if afraid to let go. When we arrived, I asked to speak with her teacher, Mrs. Parker, a kind woman with sharp eyes that missed very little. Inside the teacher's lounge, the smell of chalk and paper filled the air. Mrs. Parker sat across from me, concern written on her face. "Mrs. Walker, I've noticed changes in Emily," she began. "She seems distracted. She startles easily. Sometimes she stares at her desk for long stretches." My heart sank. "Has she said anything?" Mrs. Parker hesitated, then opened a folder. Inside were several drawings. She slid them across the table. I picked them up with trembling hands. Each picture showed a small figure of a child inside a dark room. Black lines surrounded the child like bars on a cage. "She draws this almost every art class," Mrs. Parker said softly. I asked her about it once, but she only shook her head. "I'm worried she's carrying something she can't express." Tears burned in my eyes. Those pictures were not the work of imagination. They were windows into Emily's fear. "Thank you, Mrs. Parker," I whispered. "Please keep an eye on her. She may need your support." On the way home, I held the drawings close against my chest, as though they were evidence in a trial that only I believed in. My granddaughter's fear was real, and now I had proof in ink and crayon. That evening, as Emily sat quietly on the couch, watching cartoons without laughing, I tried again. "Sweetheart, you can tell me anything. You don't have to keep secrets for anyone, not even your mommy." She turned her head slowly, eyes glistening. For a moment I thought she would speak. But then she hugged Barnaby tighter and whispered, "I promised. If I tell, bad things will happen." My throat tightened. "Nothing bad will happen, Emily. Not while Grandma is here." But she shook her head, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. I gathered her into my arms, rocking her gently, just as I used to rock Michael when he was small. Her tiny body trembled. I realized then how heavy a burden this child was carrying, too heavy for a 5-year-old. That night I sat in the old rocking chair by the window long after she fell asleep. Outside, the wind moved the crepe myrtle branches, scattering petals onto the porch. I thought of Michael. I whispered to his picture, "Son, your little girl is in trouble. She's holding secrets no child should carry. What should I do?" No answer came, only the creak of the chair and the ticking clock. But deep inside, I knew. I could no longer wait for things to fix themselves. Emily's nightmares, her drawings, her whispers, they were pieces of a puzzle that pointed to something terrible. I had to face it, no matter how painful. After Emily's drawings and her restless nights, I felt like the walls of my house were closing in on me. Each time I looked at her, pale and quiet, clutching Barnaby, I knew she was carrying more than a child ever should. My heart ached, and yet the world outside went on as if nothing was wrong. One afternoon, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The crepe myrtle blossoms drifted down like drops of red silk, collecting on the steps. The street was calm, but inside me, there was no peace. It was then that I saw Mr. Nalnace Thompson, my elderly neighbor, making his way down the sidewalk with his cane. He was a widower, sharp-eyed and steady, the kind of man who noticed everything on the street. He stopped when he saw me and raised a hand. "Mrs. Walker," he said, his voice low and serious. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to smile, though it came out weak. Just tired. Mr. Thompson. That's all. But he was not convinced. He leaned on his cane and studied me. No, it's more than that. I know when something's weighing heavy on a person. He hesitated. Should I tell him? Could I risk sharing Emily's secret? But his eyes were kind, and I remembered how many times he had helped with small things, like fixing a fence or bringing in groceries. If there was anyone I could test the truth on, it was him. Emily said something strange. I finally whispered. Something about a little girl. At Jessica's house. Mr. Thompson's brow furrowed. He glanced up and down the street, then stepped closer to my porch. His voice dropped to a hush. I wasn't going to say anything, but now I think I should. Last week I couldn't sleep, so I went out into my yard. That's when I saw Jessica. I sat up straight. What did you see? She was rushing into her house, holding the hand of a little girl. But it wasn't Emily. This girl was smaller, her hair shorter. It was well past midnight. At first I thought I might be mistaken, but then I heard a sound. A cry. It was muffled, but I heard it. The air left my lungs in a sharp gasp. Are you sure it wasn't Emily? He shook his head firmly. No, I know Emily's face. I've watched her grow up. This was not her. My hands gripped the arms of the rocking chair until my knuckles turned white. The pieces were coming together, and none of them made sense. Emily's whisper, her drawings, her nightmares, and now a witness who had seen a strange child. Mr. Thompson, I said, my voice shaking. Please, if you ever see something again, tell me right away. I will, he promised. But you need to be careful. Jessica is your daughter-in-law. If this is what it sounds like, it's serious. You can't confront her alone. I nodded, though fear clawed at my chest. Serious was too mild a word for what I felt. This was terrifying. That evening, when Jessica came to pick up Emily, I studied her carefully. She stood in the yard, instead of stepping inside as she used to. Her eyes darted around nervously. Emily clung to my side, her teddy bear pressed against her cheek. Thanks for watching her, Jessica said. Her tone was flat, almost cold. She avoided my gaze, then looked at Emily with a quick, sharp glance. Come on, Emily. Emily hesitated, her eyes filling with tears as she turned toward me. I wanted to hold her back, to demand answers from Jessica, but my tongue felt heavy. Jessica's stare was like a wall I could not break through. As they walked away, Emily looked over her shoulder at me. The sadness in her eyes pierced my soul. I stood frozen on the porch until their car disappeared down the street. That night I sat by the window, staring into the dark. My thoughts tangled like the branches swaying in the wind. What had Jessica done? Who was that child Mr. Thompson saw? And why did Emily look more frightened every day? I prayed for guidance, but my prayers felt heavy, unanswered. Yet one truth remained clear. I could not ignore the signs. I could not dismiss Emily's fears. I had to do something. The next morning, I woke with a pounding determination. I dressed quickly, put on my coat, and walked to the bus stop. The city bus carried me downtown to the police precinct, where the air smelled of stale coffee and old paper. I told myself that today, I would not be silent. The bus ride to the police precinct felt longer than any trip I had ever taken. The streets of Atlanta rolled by, but I barely noticed. My hands clutched my purse so tightly. My knuckles ached. Inside were Emily's drawings, folded carefully, as if they were sacred proof of the truth I carried. When I stepped inside the precinct, the smell of damp paper and burnt coffee filled the air. A young officer at the front desk looked up at me with polite curiosity. Ma'am, can I help you? Yes, I said, my voice trembling, but steady enough. I need to speak with the officer in charge. It's urgent. He studied me for a moment, then nodded and led me to a small room in the back. Behind a scratched wooden desk sat a man with tired eyes and a face that looked as though it had seen too much. His nameplate read Captain Davis. Mrs. Walker. Is it? He asked, gesturing for me to sit. I lowered myself into the chair, my heart pounding. Captain, I'm here because I believe a child is in danger. My granddaughter Emily told me there's a little girl locked in the basement at my daughter-in-law Jessica's home. His brows lifted slightly, but his expression stayed calm. That's a serious accusation. What makes you believe it? I opened my purse and slid the drawings across the desk. These are Emily's. She draws the same thing every time, always a child behind bars. She's been having nightmares, waking up in fear, whispering things no child should say. I took a breath, steadying myself, and my neighbor, Mr. Thompson, saw Jessica bring home another little girl late at night, a child who wasn't Emily. He heard crying. Captain Davis tapped his fingers on the desk, his gaze unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Mrs. Walker, I don't doubt that you're concerned, but what you've shared, drawings, nightmares, and a neighbor's observation, it isn't enough. It doesn't give us probable cause to search Jessica's home. His words fell on me like cold rain. But Captain, I pleaded, my voice breaking, what if it's true? What if there's a child down there right now? Every minute matters. He shook his head slowly. We'll file your report, but unless we have stronger evidence, there's nothing more we can do at this time. I stared at him, my chest hollow. Stronger evidence. What stronger evidence could there be than a child's whisper and a neighbor's testimony? Did they need to see the tears in Emily's eyes to believe me? I stood, gripping the strap of my purse. If something happens to that child, I said quietly, her blood will be on your hands too. For a flicker of a moment, his tired eyes softened. But then his professional mask returned. Good day, Mrs. Walker. I left the precinct feeling smaller than when I had entered. The midday sun shone brightly, but to me, the world felt gray. As I walked to the bus stop, people bustled around me, carrying on with their lives, unaware of the storm inside me. By the time I returned home, word had already spread. Jessica had moved fast. Neighbors looked at me with pity, some with suspicion. I overheard whispers at the market. Poor old Mrs. Walker. She's losing her mind. She misses her granddaughter so much, she's imagining things. Each word was a dagger. I wanted to shout, to tell them the truth. But I knew it would only make me look more desperate. Jessica had painted me as a grieving old woman, delusional with loss, and the neighborhood believed her. That evening, Jessica arrived with her brother, Ethan, to pick up Emily. She stood in the yard, crying loudly, her voice echoing down the street. She's slandering me. Ethan. Jessica veiled. She says I kidnapped a child. She wants to destroy me. Ethan stepped forward, pointing a finger at me. You should be ashamed. Mom, how dare you accuse my sister like this? Leave our family alone. The neighbors gathered, their eyes fixed on me. I felt them judging, whispering, pitying. Some shook their heads. Others muttered, poor thing. She's gone senile. Emily looked at me from the car window as Jessica pulled her away. Her eyes were wide, pleading, begging me without words. Save me, Grandma. That look seared itself into my soul. When the car drove off, I stood on the porch, trembling, the weight of the world pressing down on me. My neighbor's stars cut into me like knives. They didn't see a woman fighting for the truth. They saw a lonely widow, blinded by grief. Inside, I collapsed into my old armchair, staring at Michael's photo on the wall. His smile seemed to ask me the question I already dreaded. Will you give up, Mom? Or will you keep fighting? Tears blurred my vision. Michael, I don't know if I have the strength. I whispered. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. But Emily, she needs me. That other little girl needs me too. The house was silent, except for the creak of the chair and the ticking of the clock. Yet deep inside, a small flame still burned. I couldn't give up. I wouldn't. If the police wouldn't believe me, if the neighbors turned against me, then I would find another way. For Emily, for that nameless child, for the truth. The night after Jessica and Ethan's public outburst, I could hardly sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face at the car window, her little hands clutching Barnaby, her eyes filled with fear. The whispers of the neighbors still rang in my ears. Poor old woman. She's lost her mind. I sat in my armchair until dawn, staring at Michael's photo on the wall. Son, I whispered, I promised I would protect her, but I feel like I'm standing alone against the whole world. The following morning, I tried to carry on with my usual routine. I walked to the market, hoping the ordinary tasks of buying bread and vegetables would steady me. But the moment I entered, conversation dropped. Eyes followed me. I caught pieces of hushed voices, She's the one who accused her own daughter-in-law. Imagine saying something like that. It's cruel. She must be grieving too much. I kept my head down, but each word cut into me like a blade. I finished quickly and headed home, my bag heavier than it should have been. When I reached my porch, I saw Brenda waiting for me. She stood by the steps, holding a wicker basket filled with warm cornbread, her eyes soft with concern. Brenda had been my friend for over 30 years, ever since our children were small. She was one of the few who still knocked on my door after Michael's death. Madge, she said gently, guiding me to sit on the bench outside. I saw what happened yesterday. People are talking, but I want you to know I don't believe for a second that you made this up. The words loosened something inside me, and tears I had been holding back spilled down my cheeks. Brenda, thank you. Everyone thinks I'm losing my mind. Even the police dismissed me. Brenda took my hands, squeezing them firmly. I saw Emily's eyes last night when Jessica dragged her away. That wasn't the look of a child who feels safe. Something is wrong, Madge, and you're right not to ignore it. Her certainty gave me a spark of strength. But what can I do? Jessica has poisoned the neighborhood against me, and the police said I don't have enough evidence. Then you find evidence? Brenda said firmly. Don't let them silence you, not when a child might be suffering. Her words lit a fire in me. I wiped my tears, feeling a little taller. You're right. I can't give up. If I do, I'll never forgive myself. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Mr. Thompson came by with a solemn look. He leaned on his cane and lowered his voice. Mrs. Walker, I heard something again last night. Knocking, like someone hitting a door, then crying. It wasn't Emily. I know that sound. It chilled me. I clutched the porch rail, my heart pounding. Do you think the girl is still there? His eyes were grave. Yes. I don't know how, but I believe she is. His confirmation was both terrifying and strengthening. It meant Emily's whisper was not just the imagination of a frightened child. It was the truth. That night, as I sat by the window, I thought about everything Emily's nightmares, the drawings, Mr. Thompson's account, and Brenda's faith in me. My fear hadn't vanished, but for the first time in days, I felt less alone. Before bed, I carefully gathered the drawings, Michael's photo, and my notes into a small bag. If something happened to me, I wanted the truth preserved. I also picked up the phone and called Mrs. Parker, Emily's teacher. My voice trembled, but I told her everything. If anything happens to me, please watch over Emily. Please keep her safe. Mrs. Parker's voice was steady. You can count on me, Mrs. Walker. And don't lose hope. Sometimes it takes one person standing firm to bring the truth into the light. Her words echoed in me as I lay down beside Emily's empty daybed. Hugging her pillow close, I whispered into the silence. Michael, I won't let them win. I will protect your little girl. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Small, fragile, but alive. The following afternoon, the sun hung low and heavy, turning the sky a pale orange. I was trimming the crepe myrtles in my yard when I heard hurried footsteps. I turned to see Mr. Thompson walking toward me with his cane in one hand and a small package tucked under his arm. His face looked more serious than I had ever seen it. Mrs. Walker, he said, his voice trembling. You need to see this. Right now. My heart skipped. What is it? He looked around, as if afraid someone might overhear. Not here. Let's go inside. I wiped my hands on my apron and followed him into my kitchen. He set the package on the table and unwrapped it, revealing an old cell phone with a cracked screen. I asked my nephew to check the security cameras at the corner store. Mr. Thompson explained. Last week, those cameras caught something you need to see. He pressed play on the phone. The grainy video showed the street outside Jessica's house. The timestamp read just after midnight. My breath caught as I saw Jessica walking quickly down the sidewalk, her hand gripping a little girl's arm. It wasn't Emily. The child was smaller, her hair tangled, her pajamas worn and dirty. She walked with a limp, her shoulders slumped as though carrying invisible chains. Jessica pulled her toward the house, glancing nervously around before rushing through the door. The footage ended there, but it was enough, more than enough. I pressed a hand to my mouth, a sob, escaping. Dear Lord. Mr. Thompson's eyes glistened with anger. I told you what I saw, but now you can see it with your own eyes. You weren't imagining this. Mrs. Walker, that little girl is real. I clutched the phone as if it were the most precious thing in the world. It was proof something undeniable. For days I had been dismissed, mocked, called crazy. Now I had something solid, something no one could ignore. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. You don't know how much this means." His hand trembled as he patted my arm. "Just promise me, you'll be careful. If Jessica is mixed up in something dark, you don't know how far it goes." That night I barely slept. I sat in my rocking chair with the phone in my lap, staring at the still frame of Jessica, dragging that child. Emily's whispers echoed in my head. "There's a little girl locked in the basement. She says her hands hurt." I knew now that Emily hadn't been imagining it. She had spoken the truth, and I had to fight for it. At dawn, I put on my old coat, wrapped a scarf around my head, and walked to the bus stop with the phone clutched tightly in my hand. The ride to the police precinct felt shorter this time, though every second pounded in my chest. When I entered, the young patrolman at the desk recognized me and raised an eyebrow. "Back again, Mrs. Walker." "Yes," I said firmly. "I need to speak to Captain Davis. And this time, I have proof." He must have heard the determination in my voice because he led me straight to the same small room. Captain Davis looked up from his paperwork, surprise flickering across his face. "Mrs. Walker," he said, leaning back in his chair. "What brings you here again?" I set the phone on his desk and pushed it toward him. "Proof," I said simply. "Watch." He pressed play. The room filled with the grainy images of Jessica dragging the child inside. For a long moment, he said nothing. His tired eyes stayed fixed on the screen. When the video ended, he frowned. It could be a relative, a friend's child. I leaned forward, my voice sharp with desperation. "No, Captain. I've lived on that street for 30 years. I know every child in our neighborhood, and I've never seen this girl before. My granddaughter told me she was locked in the basement, and Mr. Thompson saw her with his own eyes. This is real." For the first time, I saw hesitation in his expression. He glanced at the young officer by the door. "Check missing children reports in nearby counties. See if anyone matches this girl's description." The officer nodded and began typing quickly on the computer. My hands shook as I gripped the edge of my chair. Minutes passed, heavy and silent. Then the officer suddenly straightened. "Captain, there's a match. 5-year-old Chloe Vance. Reported missing 2 weeks ago from the next county over Tangsavinio. The Comzerho from Spapel Tate. The Tate and Leon Hum, Noper 5-2. End of H and Act Tam." My breath caught. The name burned into me. "Chloe." Captain Davis's face hardened. He stood abruptly, his voice sharp. "Verify this information immediately. Contact the other precinct. Request the full report." My heart pounded so loud I could hear it echo in my ears. Chloe wasn't just a shadow in Emily's whispers anymore. She was real, and she was missing. Tears welled in my eyes, but I held them back. I had fought so hard to be believed. And finally, the truth was beginning to shine through. As I left the precinct that afternoon, the phone pressed to my chest. I whispered a prayer. "Michael, we're closer now. Emily was brave enough to tell me, and now I have proof. Please give me the strength to keep going." The city buzzed around me, but inside, I felt a calm resolve. For the first time, I wasn't just a grieving grandmother with suspicions. I was the voice for Emily. And now, for Chloe too. That night, I barely slept. I sat in my living room, under the yellow glow of the lamp. Michael's photo watching me from the wall. The video. Chloe's name. The police officer's sudden urgency. All of it swirled in my mind like a storm I couldn't calm. When the phone rang close to midnight, I jumped. My heart raced as I answered. "Mrs. Walker." Captain Davis's voice came through, low but steady. "We've verified the missing child's file. We're executing a search warrant at Jessica Walker's house at dawn. Be ready." I gripped the receiver. My knees weak. "Thank you, Captain," I whispered. "I'll be ready." After he hung up, I sat in silence, staring at the rain tapping against the window. The storm outside matched the one inside me. Dawn would bring answers, but it would also bring devastation. Jessica was my daughter-in-law, Emily's mother. Once, she had been part of my family, and now, she was at the center of something I could hardly comprehend. At first light, I wrapped myself in my coat and scarf, clutching the small bag where I had tucked Emily's drawings and Michael's photo, as though they were talismans. When I heard the sirens outside, I stepped onto the porch. 2 patrol cars waited, their lights silent but flashing. Captain Davis stepped out, his face unreadable. "Let's go." "Mrs. Walker." I climbed into the back seat, staring out the fogged window as we drove through the gray morning. Every block closer to Jessica's house made my chest tighter. I thought of Emily. I thought of Chloe. And I prayed I would have the strength to face whatever was behind that basement door. When we arrived, clouds hung heavy, and a cold wind scattered petals from the crepe myrtles onto the yard like drops of blood. Officers moved quickly, forming a perimeter around the small house. Captain Davis approached the door and knocked sharply. The sound echoed like a warning. Moments later, the door swung open. Jessica stood there, her face pale with shock, but only for a heartbeat. Almost instantly, her eyes flashed with fury. "What are you doing here?" she shouted, her voice sharp, brittle. Captain Davis held up the paper. "We have a legal warrant to search the premises. Please cooperate." Jessica's gaze darted to me, standing in the yard with trembling hands. Her voice cracked with rage. "You did this. You want to destroy me. You want to take Emily away." I couldn't speak. My throat was locked. I only clutched the strap of my bag tighter. Suddenly, Ethan rushed out from the side of the house, his voice booming. "This is harassment. You can't do this. You're humiliating my sister in front of everyone." He tried to block the door, but 2 officers held him back firmly. "Stay out of the way." "Sire," one of them ordered. I looked past them and saw Emily huddled in a corner of the living room, Barnaby crushed against her chest. Her little eyes were red, her face pale. She looked at me, and in that look was a plea. Silent and desperate. "Save me, Grandma." My heart broke, but I stayed rooted to the ground, knowing this moment was bigger than both of us. Inside, officers began searching the rooms. Papers rustled, boots thudded against the floors. Jessica trailed behind them, screaming, sobbing, insisting she was innocent. Finally, they reached the end of the hallway. A small iron door stood there, old and rusted, leading down to the basement. The air itself seemed to change when they approached it. Jessica's face went white, then twisted into panic. "No," she shrieked, throwing herself in front of the door. "There's nothing down there. It's just storage. You can't go in." Her desperation was all the confirmation I needed. My heart pounded in my ears. One of the officers stepped forward with a master key. Ethan lunged, roaring like a wild animal, but 2 officers pinned him back, his protests drowned out by the metallic click of the lock. The door creaked open, and a rush of damp, stale air poured out, heavy and suffocating. Then came the sound of faint, trembling cry, a child's voice, pleading from the darkness. My knees buckled, and I gripped the porch rail to steady myself. The cry was weak but unmistakable. An officer switched on his flashlight and stepped inside. The beam cut through the shadows, landing on a small figure crouched in the corner. The child stumbled forward, eyes wide with terror. It was Chloe. Her hair was matted, her face streaked with dirt, her pajamas torn, her thin arms clutched an old cushion as if it were the only thing she owned. A filthy rag was tied around her left wrist. The officer rushed forward, scooping her into his arms. "We need EMS now," he shouted. The yard erupted with murmurs as neighbors gathered. All 10 neighbors cattered, their eyes wide, their whispers spreading like wildfire. "My God," someone gasped. "It's true. Mrs. Walker was telling the truth." I pressed a hand to my chest as tears blurred my vision. For so long I had been called delusional, accused of cruelty, painted as a liar. But now, in the sobs of that rescued child, the truth screamed louder than any rumor. Jessica collapsed to the floor, screaming incoherently. I didn't lock her up. I was protecting her. "You don't understand." Her words rang hollow, drowned out by Chloe's cries and the officer's commands. Ethan continued to fight against the men holding him. shouting that it was all a setup, all a trick. But no one listened anymore. Captain Davis's voice cut through the chaos, cold and steady. The crime is in plain sight. The neighbors stared at me with shame in their eyes. The same mouths that had called me crazy now fell silent, unable to meet my gaze. But I felt no triumph, only sorrow. As Chloe was carried to the waiting ambulance, Emily's eyes met mine again. She pressed Barnaby to her face, her small body trembling. That look, filled with both fear and hope, burned into my soul. I knew the battle wasn't over, but the door had been opened, and the truth had finally stepped into the light. The sound of the ambulance siren faded into the distance, but its echo stayed in my chest like a heartbeat. I stood frozen in Jessica's yard, my hands gripping the porch rail as though it was the only thing keeping me upright. Chloe had been carried away, her small body wrapped in a blanket, her cries still ringing in my ears. Neighbors lingered in clusters along the sidewalk, their whispers sharp as needles. Some looked at me with wide, guilty eyes. Others bowed their heads, ashamed. For days they had doubted me, mocked me, treated me like a woman losing her mind. Now the truth had been dragged into the light, and it silenced them all. Jessica was handcuffed, her face streaked with tears, her voice hoarse from screaming. "You don't understand," she wailed as the officers pulled her toward the patrol car. I was trying to help her. I didn't hurt anyone. I just wanted to protect her. But no one listened. Ethan fought like a madman, cursing at the officers who pinned him against the hood of a car. "This is a setup. She's innocent." His words scattered like broken glass, useless against the weight of what they had uncovered. I didn't move until Captain Davis approached. His face was stern, but his eyes held something softer than before. "Mrs. Walker," he said, his voice steady, "you did the right thing. Without you, we might never have found that little girl." I swallowed hard, tears filling my eyes. I only listened to Emily. I whispered, "She's the brave one. She told me the truth." He nodded. Then she saved a life. The officers escorted Jessica and Ethan away, the patrol cars rolling slowly down the street. The crowd began to thin, leaving only silence in their wake. I walked back home, my steps heavy, my heart torn between relief and sorrow. Inside my living room, the house felt different. For so long it had been filled with doubt and whispers, but now it carried the weight of truth. Michael's photo hung on the wall, his smile warm, his eyes steady. I sat in my chair, staring at him. "Son," I whispered, "we did it." Emily's courage brought another child back to her family. "I hope you're proud." That night, I couldn't rest. My thoughts stayed with Chloe. I pictured her fragile body, her trembling hands clutching that dirty cushion. I prayed she would be safe, that her parents would hold her tight and never let her go again. The next day, I went to the hospital. The air smelled of antiseptic and coffee. The halls filled with quiet footsteps. Outside one of the rooms, I saw a man and a woman huddled together, their faces wet with tears. The woman's arms wrapped tightly around a little girl in a hospital gown, Chloe. I stopped in the doorway, afraid to intrude. But when the woman noticed me, she rose and came forward. Her hands trembled as she took mine. "Mrs. Walker," her voice cracked. "We're the Vances, Chloe's parent. We don't know how to thank you." Tears burned my eyes as I shook my head. It wasn't me. It was Emily. She told me the truth when no one else would listen. The father's eyes shone with gratitude. "But you believed her. You fought when others ignored you. You gave us our daughter back. That means everything." I glanced past them at Chloe, sitting on the bed with a nurse adjusting her IV. Her eyes were tired, but there was a flicker of light there. She looked at me shyly, then raised her small hand in a wave. My throat tightened. I lifted my hand and waved back, whispering, "Welcome home, sweetheart." When I returned home later, I found Brenda waiting on my porch. She hugged me so tightly I thought I might break. "Madji," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never doubted you, but I am so proud of you. You stood firm, even when the whole town turned against you." I nodded, tears streaming freely now. "I just did what any grandmother would do." "Maybe so," she said softly, "but not everyone would have had your courage." That evening, as I sat on the porch, I noticed neighbors passing by. Some stopped to apologize, their words faltering with shame. Mrs. Hayes, the pie vendor, bowed her head. I'm sorry for doubting you. Madgie. We all were wrong. Mr. O'Donnell, who often played chess with Mr. Leave Thompson, added quietly. You showed us what it means to stand for what's right, even when it costs you. I listened, my heart heavy but forgiving. All that matters is that Chloe is safe, I said simply. When the sun set, Emily curled up beside me on the couch. Her little voice broke the silence. Grandma, am I really a hero? I pulled her close, kissing her hair. Yes, sweetheart. You're the bravest hero I know. You told the truth, even when it was scary. She smiled for the first time in days, her small arms wrapping tightly around me. I love you. Grandma, I love you too. Emily, I whispered, tears slipping down my cheeks. More than anything, as the night deepened, I looked at Michael's photo once more. For the first time in years, I felt a quiet peace in my heart. His daughter had saved another child, and through her courage, our broken family had found a flicker of light in the darkness. The morning after Chloe was reunited with her parents, the news spread across the county like wildfire. Satellite trucks lined the street. Reporters crowded the sidewalks, their microphones flashing, their cameras hungry for details. Neighbors who once avoided me now waved politely, their eyes filled with a mix of guilt and respect. But while the community buzzed with chatter, my heart stayed heavy. Jessica was still my daughter-in-law, Emily's mother, and though she had been arrested, alla 628, I couldn't understand how she had sunk so far into the shadows. That afternoon, Captain Davis visited my house. He stepped onto the porch, his hat in his hands, his expression grave. Mrs. Walker, he began. I thought you should hear this from me. I led him inside. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Emily once colored with her crayons, where Michael used to drink his morning coffee. Davis set down a folder. When our officers searched Jessica's basement, they didn't just find Chloe. They found something else. My stomach twisted. What do you mean? He opened the folder and slid out several photographs. My breath caught. Pages filled with strange symbols, messy handwriting, and names I didn't recognize stared back at me. One name, however, was circled in black ink. Elias Thorne. I looked up at him, confused. Who is that? Davis's eyes darkened. Elias Thorne is the leader of a group we've been investigating for over a year. A dangerous cult with ties to child exploitation and trafficking. We've suspected their influence in several missing persons cases. But we never had direct evidence in this county. Until now. I pressed a trembling hand against my chest. Are you telling me Jessica, my Jessica, was involved with them? We can't say for certain how deep her involvement was, Davis said carefully, but her basement contained notebooks signed by Thorne, along with coded messages and records of meetings. We believe she had contact with him or one of his followers. I shook my head, the world spinning. Memories of Jessica flooded back her laughter in the kitchen, her hands covered in flour as we baked together, that her bright eyes when Michael walked through the door. How could that same woman fall into the clutches of something so dark? Sometimes grief makes people vulnerable, Davis continued. After your son's death, she may have been drawn into this group, promised answers or purpose. But it doesn't excuse her actions. Tears welled in my eyes. She was Emily's mother. She was supposed to protect her, not expose her to this nightmare. Davis' voice softened. We'll uncover the truth. Mrs. Walker, for now, Jessica has been charged with kidnapping, unlawful detention, and conspiracy. Her brother Ethan is being investigated as well. But this case is bigger than them. It could lead us to others who've hurt children. I nodded numbly, my fingers gripping the edge of the table. The papers blurred through my tears. It wasn't just about Jessica anymore. It was about an entire network of darkness. That night, I sat in the living room with Brenda. She had come over with a casserole, her way of showing love in the middle of chaos. Emily sat nearby on the floor, hugging Barnaby, to her eyes on the cartoons, but her mind clearly far away. Brenda placed a hand on mine. Madgie, you can't blame yourself for Jessica's choices. You did everything you could to protect Emily, and that little girl. You brought the truth into the light. But Emily still has to live with this. I whispered. Her mother isn't the woman she once knew. How do I explain that to her? Brenda's eyes softened. You tell her the truth. Gently, but honestly, she'll draw her strength from you. Madji. She already has. Later that evening, when Emily climbed onto my lap, she asked the question I had dreaded. Grandma, why did Mommy do those things? Why was that girl in the basement? I held her close, kissing her hair. My voice shook, but I forced myself to answer. Sweetheart, sometimes people get lost. They forget what's right and wrong. Your Mommy made choices she shouldn't have, but none of that is your fault. And I will always keep you safe. She pressed her face into my shoulder and whispered, I just want you, Grandma. Tears spilled freely as I hugged her tighter. And you'll always have me, my love. The days that followed were a blur of police reports and news coverage. The Vance family visited often, bringing Chloe to play with Emily. Hearing the two little girls laugh together on my porch was like a healing balm, though shadows still lingered in their eyes. Captain Davis called again later that week. The investigation is expanding, he told me. Those notebooks are leading us to more names. We may be able to stop this group for good. I thanked him, my heart heavy but hopeful. If exposing Jessica's darkness could save other children, then maybe some good could rise from the ashes of our pain. That night, I sat once more beneath Michael's photo. His smile looked the same, steady and kind, as if he were telling me not to give up. Son, I whispered, your little girl was braver than anyone. And now her courage is helping more children. I wish you could see her. You'd be so proud. The wind rattled the windows, but for the first time, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like an answer. The weeks after Jessica's arrest felt like a blur, but not the kind that time erases. Each day was marked by headlines, reporters at the end of my driveway, and a constant stream of questions I didn't always have answers for. Grandmother exposes underground horror. One article read, another called me the unlikely hero of Atlanta. Those words felt foreign. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a grandmother who had simply listened when no one else would. Emily, though, was my greatest concern. The more the world talked, the quieter she became. Some mornings she sat at the kitchen table, stirring her cereal without eating. Other times, she stared out the window, Barnaby tucked under her arm, her eyes far away. One evening, I found her in the rocking chair where I used to hold Michael when he was a baby. She was curled up, knees to her chest. Emily, I said softly, kneeling beside her. What's on your mind? Sweetheart, her voice was barely a whisper. Are they going to take Mommy away forever? The question pierced me. I had been bracing for it, but hearing it aloud made my heart ache. I pulled her into my arms. I don't know how long. Love, the police and the judge will decide. But what I do know is that none of this is your fault. You told the truth, and you helped save Chloe. That was brave. Tears filled her eyes. But she's still my mom. I kissed the top of her head. Yes, she is. And nothing can change that. You'll always be her daughter. But sometimes love means facing the truth, even when it hurts. In the weeks leading up to the trial, I noticed Emily slowly beginning to heal. Chloe and her parents visited often. The two girls played in the yard, their laughter returning in bits and pieces, like sunshine breaking through clouds. Seeing Chloe safe with her mother's arms around her gave Emily comfort she couldn't put into words. Still, shadows lingered. One night, she woke from a nightmare, her cries echoing through the house. I rushed to her side, holding her as she shook. Grandma, don't let them take me. Don't let them lock me up too. My chest tightened. Never, Emily, never. You're safe with me. Always. I whispered those words until her trembling stopped. That night, I promised myself I would do everything in my power to keep her away from more pain. Meanwhile, the case against Jessica grew stronger. Captain Davis updated me regularly, his voice steady but grim. The notebooks found in her basement tie directly to Elias Thorne's network. We've traced meetings, coded messages, even names of other members. This trial will shine a light into places that have stayed dark for too long. The prosecutors prepared their case, and I was called as a witness. The thought of testifying in court filled me with dread, but I knew I couldn't refuse. Emily's whisper had started it all. My voice had to finish it. Brenda came over often to keep me grounded. She would sit on my porch, sipping coffee with me, to her presence, a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I sometimes felt. "You're stronger than you think, Maggie," she said one morning. "When you take that stand, you won't just be speaking for Emily or Chloe. You'll be speaking for every child who didn't have someone to believe them." Her words planted themselves in me like seeds of courage. The first hearing was packed. Reporters lined the courthouse steps, their cameras flashing. I held Emily's hand tightly as we walked inside. Brenda on the other side of her. Emily clung to Barnaby, her eyes wide but steady. Inside the courtroom, Jessica sat at the defense table, her hair pulled back, her face pale. When her eyes met mine, I searched for the daughter-in-law I once knew, the young woman who laughed in my kitchen, who baked peach cobbler with me, who held Michael's hand with so much love. But that woman was gone. In her place was someone hardened. Desperate. Lost. The judge read the charges. Kidnapping. Unlawful detention. Conspiracy. Each word echoed like a stone dropping into water. Jessica's lawyer entered a plea of not guilty. My stomach turned. Afterward, outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones pushed toward me. "Mrs. Walker, how do you feel about your daughter-in-law's charges? Do you believe she acted alone? Are you proud of being called a hero?" I raised my hand, my voice steady. "I'm not a hero. I'm a grandmother who refused to stay silent." The real bravery came from my granddaughter, Emily, who told me the truth. "This isn't about me. It's about protecting children." The words seemed to quiet the crowd for a moment. Cameras clicked, but he no longer felt fear. I felt purpose. That evening, back home, Emily sat beside me on the porch. She leaned her head against my arm. "Grandma, did I do the right thing?" I looked at her, my heart swelling with pride. "Yes, Emily, you did the bravest thing anyone could do. You spoke the truth. And because of you, Chloe is safe. And other children will be too." She smiled faintly, then whispered, "I'm glad I told you." I kissed her forehead and held her close. Watching the sun set behind the crepe myrtles, their red petals drifted to the ground, not as drops of blood this time, but as reminders that even beauty can grow after storms. The day of the verdict arrived with heavy skies. Clouds pressed low over the courthouse as though the world itself held its breath. I dressed carefully that morning: black skirt, blue blouse, and Michael's old cross necklace around my neck. It wasn't just jewelry. It was courage. Emily stayed with Brenda. I kissed her forehead before I left, whispering, "I'll be back soon. Sweetheart, be brave for me." She hugged Barnaby tight and nodded. Inside the courthouse, the air was thick with tension. Reporters filled the back rows. Neighbors who once doubted me sat silently, their faces solemn. The Vance family was there too, Chloe between her parents, her small hand gripping her mother's fingers. Jessica sat at the defense table, pale and rigid. Her eyes flickered once toward me. I searched again for the woman who had once been part of my family, but all I saw was a stranger. The trial had stretched for weeks. I had taken the stand, my hands trembling, but my voice steady as I told the jury about Emily's whispers, her drawings, the fear in her eyes. Mr. Thompson testified about what he saw in the night. The police showed the footage, the notebooks, the codes. Piece by piece, the truth was laid bare. Now it all came down to this. The judge entered, and everyone rose. My heart pounded as the jury filed in. Faces unreadable. The foreman stood, a folded slip of paper in his hand. On the charge of kidnapping, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. The word struck the room like thunder. On the charge of unlawful detention, guilty. Jessica's shoulders sagged. On the charge of conspiracy, guilty. The final word rang through the courtroom. Gasps rippled across the crowd. Chloe's mother wept softly, clutching her daughter close. The judge's voice was firm. Jessica Walker, you are hereby sentenced to 35 years in state prison. Jessica let out a cry, a broken sound that echoed against the wood-paneled walls. Ethan shouted from the gallery, but Deputy silenced him quickly. I sat frozen, tears welling in my eyes. Relief, sorrow, justice, they all collided inside me. Jessica had been my daughter-in-law. I had wanted to believe in her goodness, but the truth had torn that illusion apart. She would spend decades behind bars, and Emily would grow up without her mother's presence. As the gavel struck, closing the trial, I closed my eyes. Michael, I thought, your little girl's courage has saved more than one life. But she has lost her mother in the process. Guide me, so I can carry her through this. Outside, Camila swarmed again. Questions flying like arrows. I spoke only one sentence. This is not about victory. It is about protecting children. Then I walked away, leaving the reporters to their noise. Back at home, Emily ran into my arms the moment I stepped through the door. Grandma, what happened? I knelt and held her close. The judge said Mommy has to stay away for a very long time. She made choices that hurt people. Emily, but none of that is your fault. And you will always have me. Her eyes filled with tears. Will I ever see her again? I stroked her hair. One day, maybe. But until then, we will keep going. We'll laugh. We'll learn. And we'll make new memories. She will always be part of you. But she does not define you. She nodded slowly, then hugged me tighter. Barnaby squished between us. As long as I have you. Grandma, I'll be okay. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I kissed her hair. You'll always have me. Emily, always. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle. Chloe's parents invited us to gatherings, hoping to surround the girls with joy and safety. Emily and Chloe played on swings, their laughter brighter each day. The shadows hadn't vanished, but they grew lighter with time. Neighbors stopped me on the street with apologies, their voices heavy with regret. I accepted them graciously, but never forgot how quickly doubt had turned to cruelty. Yet I didn't carry bitterness. I carried gratitude for Brenda's loyalty, for Mr. Thompson's courage, for Captain Davis's persistence, and most of all, for Emily's truth. One quiet evening, Emily and I sat on the porch watching fireflies flicker across the yard. She leaned her head against my arm. Grandma, do you think Daddy knows what I did? My throat tightened. I looked up at the night sky, stars scattered like seeds of hope. Yes, Emily, I believe your daddy knows. And I believe he's so proud of you. She smiled faintly, her eyes drifting upward. I hope he's smiling at us right now. I hugged her close, my heart full. I think he is. The wind rustled through the crepe myrtles, scattering petals onto the porch. This time, they looked like blessings, reminders that even after storms, beauty could fall gently into our lives again. 6 months had passed since the trial. The air in Atlanta was warmer now, with summer light spilling over the crepe myrtles in my yard. Their blossoms reminded me of the day everything came crashing down, and of the day truth came to light. Life was not perfect, but it was no longer filled with fear. Emily was healing. Her nights were not completely free of nightmares, yet the shadows had started to lift. She laughed again, sometimes with the same pure joy I remembered from her childhood. She began drawing colorful pictures filled with trees, birds, and bright houses instead of dark basements. Those drawings now hung on my refrigerator as daily reminders that children can bloom again when given safety and love. Chloe's family also carried their share of scars. I visited them often, and each time I saw Chloe run into her mother's arms with a smile, I felt a deep peace. Her laughter echoed in their home like sunlight pouring through the windows. They had enrolled her in a small art therapy group, and though her hands still trembled sometimes, she was learning to trust the world again. The bond between Emily and Chloe had become something special. They were no longer just two little girls who had shared fear. They had become sisters of the heart, finding comfort in each other's company. As for me, Madje, my days were quieter but filled with purpose. I tended my garden, cooked meals for Emily, and shared evenings on the porch with Brenda and Mr./Pater. Sterling. Neighbors who once doubted me now greeted me with kindness, sometimes even with apologies in their eyes. I did not need their apologies, but I accepted them, because forgiveness was the only way forward. The court had sentenced Jessica to a long prison term. I did not celebrate that news. I mourned the woman she once was, the daughter-in-law who had sat in my kitchen with laughter in her eyes. Yet justice had been necessary, and I believed Alex, my late son, would have wanted me to protect Emily at any cost. 6 months after the trial, I stood in the hospital hallway once again, but this time not in fear. I was invited to speak at a small gathering about community vigilance and the importance of listening to children. Parents and teachers sat before me, their faces serious, their notebooks open. I told them Emily's story and Chloe's story. And I reminded them that courage sometimes begins with the smallest whisper from a child. When I finished, I saw tears in the eyes of many. That moment made me feel that the suffering had not been in vain. The legacy of this journey was not only the justice served, but the lessons learned. We learned that silence can be dangerous, that trust in one another can save lives, and that even in the darkest storm, love can be the anchor. Emily and Chloe were living proof that healing is possible when people choose to stand together. I often return to Alex's photograph in my living room. I look into his smiling face and whisper, "We made it. Son, your little girl is safe, and she is strong." In those quiet moments, I feel his presence, and I believe he is proud of the family we have become. The lesson I carry from all of this is simple, yet powerful. Never ignore the voice of a child. Never let fear of gossip or doubt silence the truth. Protecting the innocent is always worth the risk. And to you, listening to me now, I want to say this. If this story has touched you, remember that you are not alone. There are many others who need courage, who need light, who need hope. If you believe in the power of real stories that inspire, subscribe to Her True Stories. In Her True Stories, you will find voices of resilience. In Her True Stories, you will discover families that fought for love. In Her True Stories, you will witness pain turning into strength. And through Her True Stories, you will remember that justice and compassion always matter. Please subscribe, share, and join our community so that these words continue to reach those who need them most. Because every time you listen, every time you share, Her True Stories grows stronger. And together we can keep the light burning for those still waiting in the dark.